NATO is no longer brain dead thanks to Putin's war. A few years ago, French President Emmanuel Macron called NATO brain dead. But against all his intentions, Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin managed to revive the country after the Ukrainian war. Kremlin President Vladimir Putin accomplished the opposite of his original intentions in many ways with Russia's attack on Ukraine. This also applies to NATO. If he wants to break it up, it will eventually grow together in a way he never had before. Although he wanted to weaken her, he did not strengthen himself for a long time. If it wants to stop its spread, let it grow. NATO has no expansion plans. It currently has 31 member states. It will add Sweden and maybe Ukraine at some point. The example of Finland, a newcomer to the coalition, clearly demonstrates the failure of Russian foreign policy. Previously it was a neutral country. Russia is now almost 1,400 miles from the NATO border. It now has a significant presence in the Baltic region, including German forces in the Baltic states. Contrary to what Russia claims, NATO does not see eastward expansion as a goal, and the United States will prevent it. It is these countries themselves who seek access to the world's largest armed forces for security. 2/3 of the spending is in the US. However, there are some inconsistencies in the military alliance. With over 1.3 million soldiers, the United States is arguably the largest military force. Turkey ranks second with an army of around 450,000, but has more than double the number of soldiers in Germany's Bundeswehr. Also, the United States provides the largest military force ever. Europe cannot be successful right now without political, collaborative, and nuclear defense confidence and military defense in the country, said Claudia Major, a security expert at the German Science and Political Foundation. And the Political Foundation. Russia long ago without the United States, Washington shouldered the lion's share in Ukraine's aid. Overall, NATO uses little without the United States. 2/3 of NATO's nearly $1.2 trillion military spending in 2022 will go to the United States. European inefficiency. But it's not just money that creates America's productivity. Despite the large budget, the ineffectiveness of European military cooperation creates conflict. Europeans have 6 times more guns than the US, which makes cooperation more difficult and costly. Some weapon systems, such as frigates or battle tanks or special guns, exist in different types, but many systems are not the same. Turkey looks after its own interests. But politically, NATO is not homogeneous. Located geostrategically on the border of Europe and the Middle East, Turkey's security interests are completely different from Finland's. Since 2016, Turkey's military action in northern Syria has caused a lot of anger in defense cooperation. At integration, Turkey is very good at advancing its interests. Sweden's refusal to recognize its interests while joining is an example. Meanwhile, the Turks angered everyone by purchasing Russia's S-400 air defense system in 2017. The US later cancelled its plans to sell F-35 fighter jets to Istanbul due to concerns of surveillance by the S-400 system. Many companies still bypass EU sanctions against Russia from Turkey. Products exported with dual use can help supply Russian military equipment. When it comes to Turkey's interests in the Mediterranean oil fields, The government has even sent a Navy-escorted research vessel to explore the Greek islands off the Turkish coast. So it's about the conflict between NATO partners that can escalate in the short term and can be resolved by military action. Key differences. Finland faces its neighbor Russia, which shares a border of about 2,400 miles. From a military standpoint, the country is a key asset to NATO, experts say. Yes, Finns now want Sweden to join as soon as possible, as this will strengthen the entire Scandinavian region. The Baltics want the same. They are one of those people who always want to support Ukraine. They fear Russia as much as Poland, a memory of Russia's long history. Then Germany and France. Both sides want to cooperate with the military, but in practice this is not possible. Although the firefighter and the tank will be built together, the partners cannot fully agree on the direction and design of the system. Germany has now placed its first order for US warplanes. Activating the defense plan. These are just a few of the many challenges facing the NATO alliance. No wonder it repeats the unity of all declarations and a good job for Russia. A few years ago, French President Emmanuel Macron called NATO brain dead. Meanwhile, Macron walked away from the conversation as Putin himself regrouped from the war in Ukraine, despite all the conflicting sides. Opened and updates the NATO defense system. For the first time since the Cold War, they have a workable strategy to protect the entire organization. 300,000 soldiers will be provided for this purpose. Largest increase in spending for the year. In the Far East, NATO increased its military strength and adopted a new strategy. In addition, military spending will increase by 8.3% on average across all member states, the largest increase in a decade. Many goals are still on paper, and we know from the past how long it takes to bring an idea to life. And Donald Trump, the new President of the United States, can throw it all away. At the 2018 summit, he hardly concealed the threat of withdrawal from NATO. The United States will elect its new president in a year and a half. Despite the revival of the alliance, NATO remains a competitive power. What was NATO before Russia invaded Ukraine? This is the Cold War pursuit of purpose, Washington's intervention in Asia, and an unnecessary threat to Russia. At least that's what academics and media experts tell us. Europe's top diplomat, French President Emmanuel Macron, also echoed this sentiment and described the organization as brain dead. The French leader has long commented on what Europe calls freedom of democracy, and is attacked by old friends for appearing to question Europe's involvement in Washington. Comments in 2019 that NATO cooperation is beyond brain death came after the tumultuous years of Donald Trump's presidency, after NATO member Turkey's military presence in Syria challenged the alliance. In a speech in Bratislava on Wednesday, he spoke of his incredible punishment 4 years ago and said it shows the division that existed in NATO at the time. I can say today that Russian President Vladimir Putin brought up the worst electricity loss, he said. NATO has done a good job in securing the border from the first day of the conflict. Article 5 is fully operational and I believe it can deter Russia. Mr. Macron said that the European powers should thank our American friends who provided Ukraine with much of the equipment and technical support. But he warned that President Joe Biden's European-friendly government won't be the same. Trump is seeking a comeback, and European officials have expressed concern about his possible return. Macron said the United States wants Europe to share more of the burden on NATO, regardless of who is in government. We cannot rely on our security and stability for the choices of the American voter next year, said. The European pillar at the heart of NATO is still important, because whether we like it or not, our lands will not change. We will be in the same place, Russia will still be Russia with the same borders and regions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the conflict on the front is now weakening it and hindering development and investment. After all, the decision was made after 2014, and we know what the decision was when Russia attacked Ukraine last February, he said. Macron's last meeting with Putin earlier last year was unsuccessful. The terms of the deal must be chosen by the victims, he said. NATO members Turkey and Hungary call for an early ceasefire, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is pushing for a 10-point peace plan. That includes the withdrawal of the entire Russian army.